Okay, so a while back I made a video on what I personally believe to be the nadir of the entire SpongeBob series, that being the Sandy Cheeks movie, the fourth overall SpongeBob movie, and the first one to be released on Netflix. The problem is, the movie just completely lacked everything that made SpongeBob good. It felt a lot more babyish when compared to what SpongeBob usually is. Now, I understand that SpongeBob as a franchise has always been targeted towards kids, but the thing is, the older episodes of SpongeBob had this universal appeal to them where, yeah, kids were the main demographic for the show, but a teenager and an adult could still very easily enjoy the show just as much, because it was that funny. It was that well written, the older episodes of the show. This movie, in comparison, just felt like generic Cocomelon slop for babies. This was not SpongeBob. I don't know what the hell this is. I know it is an extremely cold take, like it's a fucking Ice Age take right here to say that SpongeBob isn't as good as it used to be, but this movie to me represented a new low for the franchise. Unironically, I think this is a lower point for the franchise than a Pal for Gary or One Course Meal. I don't care. I'm fucking going there. Lo and behold, this would not be the only SpongeBob spin-off movie that we would get. Around the same time this movie came out, another SpongeBob movie was leaked, this time revolving around Plankton, the main villain of the series. It's worth noting as well that the Sandy Cheeks movie was also leaked prior to officially coming out, so I don't know what the hell is going on with Netflix's security. I didn't watch the Sandy Cheeks movie when it was leaked. I waited until it officially came out properly in order for me to make a video on it. And I did the exact same thing with the Plankton movie. Those that did watch the leaked version of this Plankton movie had very mixed things to say about it. Some people said the movie was surprisingly good, while others said the movie was unsurprisingly bad. The general consensus across both sides, though, was that the movie was better than the Sandy Cheeks movie. And having officially watched the movie myself, I can say, yeah, it is better than the Sandy Cheeks movie, but it still doesn't feel like SpongeBob, damn it. It still lacks a lot of what made SpongeBob so good. That shell of its former self vibe that you get watching the Sandy Cheeks movie, it's still there in this Plankton movie. It's not there as much, but it is still there. The dumbed down, only appealing to young children feel that the Sandy Cheeks movie had, this movie has it as well. And yet for some reason, I don't know how to elaborate on this, I don't know how much sense this is gonna make, it doesn't feel as insulting for this movie compared to the Sandy Cheeks movie. This is a movie that obviously doesn't have much universal appeal like the older SpongeBob episodes, but for some reason it doesn't feel as insulting here as it did in the Sandy Cheeks movie. I don't know why, it just doesn't. The movie overall, I want to say, is a considerate improvement over the Sandy Cheeks movie. It is a little bit more tolerable than the Sandy Cheeks movie. But make no mistake, this movie is not good. This movie is still a massive far cry from what SpongeBob used to be. So the main character of this movie is Plankton, obviously. Now, I personally believe that Plankton has a lot of potential for his own spin-off movie. The movie specifically focuses on the relationship between Plankton and his computer wife, Karen. Early into the movie, Karen gets fed up with how Plankton treats her, believing that he treats her as an accomplice, a servant to his attempts to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, rather than treating her like she's his wife. Eventually, Karen reaches a breaking point and becomes this ultra mega Karen or something like that, I don't know, as she plans to take over the world all by herself without Plankton's help. And so it's up to Plankton, with the help of SpongeBob, to stop Karen and for once save the world. There are a lot of ideas for a Plankton movie, and I mean a lot of them, but one idea that would never come to my mind would be the movie focusing heavily on the relationship between Karen and Plankton. There are obviously many other ideas for a Plankton movie, and yeah, a lot of them could involve Karen as well, but I would never expect them to make a Plankton movie that focuses mainly on the relationship between these two. So I'll give the movie that. It does have a kind of a different, unique premise in that regard. Another thing that I will praise this movie for, especially when compared to the Sandy Cheeks movie, is that there's not as many nostalgia bait references like in the Sandy Cheeks movie. Of course, though, they are still there in the movie, and they're not very funny, but they only happen 2 times. For whatever reason, the nostalgia bait references in this movie in question are both related to the first SpongeBob movie from 2004. There's a scene where Goofy Goober briefly appears, which is crazy to me because I think it's like, isn't it only in the first SpongeBob movie they show Goofy Goober and in none of the other, like, none of the episodes? I wouldn't be surprised if they show it in, like, the modern episodes because they have the tendency to just rehash old stuff from the show's golden age. And then there's a scene later on where SpongeBob and Plankton are trying to look for a way to stop this Ultra Karen or whatever, and SpongeBob pulls out the chum bucket helmets that were in the first movie. But besides that, there's no nostalgia bait references like in the Sandy Cheeks movie, and they are not as forced as they were in the Sandy Cheeks movie. Let me go ahead and remind y'all that near the end of the Sandy Cheeks movie, there's a scene where all of the main characters get together to collect different wires, and you could hear Patrick in the background say, "Is mayonnaise a wire?" And it is one of the most cringy things I've ever heard in my entire life. This movie doesn't have anything as bad as that, thankfully. There's also 2 funny moments in this movie. So the first scene I want to talk about involves SpongeBob and Plankton at the Bargain Mart. Now the Ultra Karen or whatever is collecting all sorts of metal items via magnet in order to help build her true self, I guess, to take over the world. As SpongeBob and Plankton hide in the Bargain Mart, it gets lifted up into the air, and the 2 of them try to escape. However, they are both stuck on a wall, with a lot of knives flying towards them. And then, boom, the knives hit the wall. And then it does the predictable thing where it's like, oh no, it actually didn't hurt them. They managed to avoid the knives. It's a rather cliched joke that's been done before numerous times, but I think it's done a little bit funnier here just because of the tomatoes. The moment the knives hit, the tomatoes become ketchup, which obviously this looks like blood. The first time I watched this movie, I was like, oh damn, that's kind of a risky joke, I'm not gonna lie. Not the joke itself, but the inclusion of tomatoes to represent blood. This joke would have been nowhere near as memorable if the tomatoes weren't there. I mean, again, as it stands, this is a very cliche joke, but it's made a little bit more memorable by the tomatoes that become ketchup that look like blood. And it just made me laugh because of that, because, you know, it's kind of a risky thing to include in this baby movie for babies. And then the second funny moment in this movie happens near the end. So there's a musical number, which I'll get into in a little bit. This is a musical. Of course it is. There's a musical number near the end where Plankton expresses his love for Karen or whatever. It's meant to be like a joke, like slow ballad, you know, like think of Peaches from the Mario movie. It's like kind of akin to that. So it starts off with Plankton playing on the piano, and then it cuts to like a close-up of him playing the piano, and it's like a guy, like it's like a real life human, a real life guy just playing the piano, but he's like painted in green makeup, and it looks so stupid. That's like, it's honestly funny. It's like deliberately campy, and I honestly kind of love that. But yeah, those are the only 2 funny moments in the movie. I would say this movie is better than the Sandy Cheeks movie because of that, but given the fact that the Sandy Cheeks movie also only had 2 funny moments in it, I can't do that. But yes, there are songs in this movie, and they're very bleh, I guess you could say. They're not the worst songs in the world, but they're not exactly earworms either. Honestly, there aren't really that many songs in the movie. I think there's only like 4 to 5 songs in the entire movie, and that's it. I'm not sure how many songs a movie should have in order for it to be considered a musical, but I guess by definition, yes, this movie is a musical, and a very bleh one at that. Something that I will say about the musical numbers is I do like the animation styles that they have. I like, the 2D animation. It honestly makes me wish that the rest of the movie was animated in like this 2D style like the show, because this lower quality 3D animation just doesn't look good. I understand this is a low budget Netflix movie. I'm not expecting beautiful theatrical animation, but there's just something off having SpongeBob in 3D. Like, the main cast themselves look perfectly fine in 3D. SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Sandy, Mr. Krabs, Plankton, etc. They look fine in 3D. But then, like, the background fish just look kind of off in 3D, and I don't know why. I just look at, like, the town of Bikini Bottom, and it's like, it feels weirdly lifeless and empty when it's in 3D compared to when it's in 2D. Again, I'm not one of those bring back 2D animation weirdos, but, like, the 3D animation is not very good in this movie. I think having the movie be 2D animated, and more specifically having it have a different art style from the main show, would make the movie a lot more interesting, but alas, that's not the case. Then again, though, maybe it's for the better that such a boring, bland animation style is used for this generic, bland animated movie. I've mostly praised this movie for being not as bad as the Sandy Cheeks movie, but make no mistake, this movie's not that good either. But it's not the worst thing at the same time. If I were to rank the SpongeBob movies from best to worst, I would say this movie is definitely better than the Sandy Cheeks movie. I've already made that very clear a million times before. The Sandy Cheeks movie is a crime against humanity. This movie is just a generic baby movie, and that's it. It's relatively harmless, I guess. At the same time, though, this movie is definitely inferior to Sponge Out of Water, and for sure, it does not hold a candle to the original classic from 2004. I feel like we've all just accepted a long time ago that, yeah, there will never be a SpongeBob movie as good as the first 2004 movie. I think this movie might be a tiny bit better than Sponge on the Run, simply because Sponge on the Run I think has a more lackluster plot, being just a hybrid of the first movie's plot mixed in with the plot of Have You Seen This Snail? It has absolutely gorgeous animation, but that's really about it. That's all that it has going for it. So then that would put this movie smack dab in the middle on the ranking list. Apparently there's going to be another SpongeBob movie that's coming out this year in 2025, at the very end of 2025, and this one is going to be a theatrical movie, the 4th theatrical installment in this franchise, and I believe this is coming out in December of 2025. All I'm gonna say is, Avatar Fire and Ash is about to have some serious competition. I'm also just gonna bring up that I believe Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is supposed to come out around the same time, so I cannot imagine how surreal it'll be seeing a Five Nights at Freddy's movie and a SpongeBob movie open up at around the same time. 12-year-old me would have gone absolutely insane seeing this happen. This would have been my Barbenheimer over here. Actually, no, given my history with these two movies, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to make such a joke, but I just made it anyways, and I can't undo it. I can't untell that joke. I'm sorry. So who knows how this 4th theatrical SpongeBob movie will turn out. I don't have much hope for it, though. I don't have much hope for it. As it stands, the Plankton movie is just a very bleh animated movie. It's better than the Sandy Cheeks movie, but it is a massive far cry from what SpongeBob used to be. You definitely feel the shell of its former self vibe watching this movie. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that whole meme where it's like, when you're a kid, you relate to SpongeBob and you think Squidward is this grumpy old man and whatever, but then when you're an adult, you relate to Squidward and you think SpongeBob is annoying and whatever. I think this movie was the first time ever that I felt that kind of. And that's even more crazy because Squidward's barely even in the movie. I guess Plankton could be like a substitute for Squidward in this case. But just watching this movie, watching all of the scenes of SpongeBob, and it's like, I don't know, it's not the same. Again, one could argue, you know, maybe I've outgrown SpongeBob, but I don't know. If I watch the older episodes, they're still gonna be hilarious. It's not even just nostalgia either. If I never grew up with SpongeBob as a kid for whatever reason, maybe I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob during its golden age in the early 2000s. Maybe I was born earlier in the 70s or 80s or so. By the time SpongeBob came out, I would have been too old for it. I don't know. For whatever reason, I wouldn't be allowed to grow up watching SpongeBob as a kid. So instead I watch it for the first time as an adult. And I guarantee you, I would still look at episodes like Pizza Delivery and Chocolate with Nuts, Band Geeks, whatever, and I would find them to be amazing episodes. I would still look at like Graveyard Shift and I would still consider it a hilarious episode, even if I have zero childhood memories, zero nostalgia attached to it. Because that's how good the older SpongeBob episodes were. And this movie, it might not be the worst thing in the world, but it does lack a lot of what made older SpongeBob good. It's not the same, you know, it's not the same. I can only imagine the next character spin-off movie that we will get from this franchise. And hopefully it ends up being a better movie than this, and especially the Sandy Cheeks movie. When you've reached rock bottom, no pun intended, the only place you can go is up. So let's hope they keep going up with whatever the next character spin-off movie will be. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.